You've spoken about the intelligibility of the universe, the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, and the way that is very coherent when it comes to a theistic outlook on the world. What about the actual results of science? Because obviously what a lot of people are interested in are some of the things like Big Bang cosmology, this idea that there was a beginning, physical beginning to the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe where the parameters and numbers of the physics themselves and the laws seem so exquisitely finely tuned to allow life to develop in the cosmos. To what extent do you think Christians can use those kinds of physical discoveries to build a case for a mind behind the universe?
To a very great extent, because our atheist friends see there is a problem. Take the Big Bang first. Of course, Fred Hoyle coined that phrase, Big Bang. It was a label on a mystery. It was his rejection, really, and repugnance to the idea of a beginning. And part of that, his colleagues said, was he didn't really like the idea of a creator. Now, what is so interesting about that is that I remember the 1960s when the evidence came in strong and heavy that there was a beginning to space-time. It was resisted in the UK, even by the editor of Nature, who said we shouldn't go down that road because it'll give too much leverage to people who believe in creation. In other words, it raised the obvious question, if there was a beginning to space-time, and everything we know this universe proceeded from that point, it raises the question, what caused it? What lies behind it? Now, oddly enough, it was the 1960s where we had the definitive evidence came in. For centuries, it had been believed with Aristotle that the universe was eternal. But the Hebrew Bible had, for centuries, and the Christian New Testament had been claiming that there was a beginning. And they were proved to be right. And when I mentioned this in a debate with Dawkins, he said, what's the big deal? There either was a beginning and there wasn't. So if you guess, you've got a 50% chance of getting it right. I said, Richard, it wasn't decided by statistics or tossing a coin. It was decided against enormous pressure. And a lot of the pressure coming from atheism, that it couldn't be so. So to be able to say, initially, as you say, the pushback against the idea that there was a beginning to space-time actually did come primarily from atheist scientists. And they had to give in because of the sheer weight of evidence. So Dawkins was wrong when he suggested to me that it was the toss of a coin. And I have made the point repeatedly, at least the Bible got it right all those millennia ago. And so we have a beginning. It raises the question of, well, what caused that? The cosmologists, brilliant people like the late Stephen Hawking, come in to try to explain how you can get something from nothing. This is the key philosophical question, goes back to Leibniz and Heidegger and all kinds of other people. How do you get something for nothing? And his key statement in his penultimate book is, because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Now, when I read that, I thought, pardon? Because there is a law like gravity, because there's something, the universe will create itself from nothing. That's a flat logical contradiction. But then, on inquiring a bit further, I noticed, well, because there's a law like gravity, is this falling for the common mistake among scientists that laws create things? C.S. Lewis debunked that long ago when pointing out that the laws of arithmetic won't create any money for you, even though some experts in the banking world thought it could. And then finally, the universe will create itself. Well, what does that mean? Just analyzing the words. If I say X creates Y, it means if you've got X, you're going to get Y, roughly speaking. If I say X creates X, well, as I said in my book, it means nonsense remains nonsense, even if high-powered scientists talk it. Now, that profoundly disturbed me. If this is the way you get rid of God, then it is intellectually unworthy. And think of Lawrence Krauss in his book, A Universe from Nothing, where he says near the beginning, he says, surely nothing must be physical, just as something is, even if it is the absence of something. Well, that's just sheer rubbish. Now, if people to get rid of God have to resort to rubbish, then using inference, the best explanation, the God explanation comes off very much more effectively. It really does worry me, that kind of non-explanation that is being foisted on people today. So there's a huge question. Hawking has not solved the question of why there's something rather than nothing. And what I want to say very carefully is, a universe came from nothing physical, but it didn't come from nothing. It came from God, who's not nothing. God may be spirit, but he isn't nothing. And therefore, again, the biblical worldview comes in with an explanation that makes sense. Now, I've mentioned once or twice in the course of this chat, inference to the best explanation. You see, science has got several ways of explaining things, and one of them is inductive explanation. That is where you do a lot of experiments, you can repeat them, and you come to a conclusion, and you expect to happen tomorrow what happened yesterday, and so on. But there's lots of fascinating things in the universe that are not repeated, like the origin of the universe, or the origin of life. And there you have to use inference to the best explanation. In other words, the methods of the historian or forensic scientist. Hercule Poirot cannot say, well, let's see what happened. Let's repeat the murder and we can see exactly what happened. You can't do that. So he has to use inference. Now, if A did the murder, you'd expect X to happen. X happened. But then Y has happened, and that excludes A. But if B did the murder, both X and Y would happen. So that B is a more plausible candidate. And so you make an inference to the best explanation. And that's the secret of Agatha Christie's denouements.